and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf. It's another end of the year, festivities are around the corner, and children will soon be back from school for the holidays. Sadly, Sylvester Oromoni and Karen Hapuch Apaga, who attended different private secondary schools in the country, won't be joining their families in this year's festivities. Sylvester passed on after sustaining injuries from alleged bullies in his school, Darwin College in Lagos, while Karen Hapuch took ill from alleged internal rape injuries and later died in controversial circumstances while she was still a student at Premier Academy here in Abuja. In both scenarios, the school authorities gave statements that seemed at odds with the evidence put out by their parents, even though in the instance of Darwin College, it's since released another statement saying it's shocked that the child sustained leg injuries and passed on a week later, and they've pledged to work with state authorities to get to the bottom of the matter. The House of Representatives have also weighed in on the issue, asking the Inspector General of Police to weigh in on the matter. The alleged suspects be placed on a no-fly list, and the Federal Ministry of Education be asked to come up with boarding house guidelines for secondary schools. Now, while these are desirable, especially as we all seek justice for these children whose scandals have been allowed to be put out too early, how have we all enabled this culture of silence, which eventually led to the death of these children? Tonight on Hard Copy, I speak with Honorable Onyime Idem, who moved a motion on the floor of the House of Representatives regarding the death of these children, and Oluwatoyin Ogunkomi, a psychologist, a certified parenting educator, and a family life therapist. Honorable Idem and Madam Ogunkomi, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, for a number of Nigerians, we know that violence in our schools, especially in recent history, is not strange. We're no strangers to what happened to the girls at Chibok. We're not stranger to what happened to the boys at Budiyadi. We're not stranger to what happened to the people in Niger State, the children who were kidnapped, primary school children in this instance, who were kidnapped for days, in Niger State. However, months rather. However, in this instance, we're now talking about internal violence. The House of Reps, you moved a motion on the floor of the House of Reps, and you are a parenting coach and also a psychologist. Let me ask you first, how did this hit you?
I'll start as a parent. Let me take away all my titles and all that. As a parent, it's very, very saddening taking a child to school and having the child back in that form. I felt very, very bad. It's very, very disheartening, and it's not something I wish on any parents.
How did the House of Reps receive this?
Thank you very much. I would like to start by commending the leadership of the House of Representatives, led by the Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, for the support that he gave to the motion, and also my colleagues, because just like my colleague said here, that watching your parents being bullied that way, and when you look at the essence of sending children to boarding schools, you see that the essence was right, to give the child, concentration, focus on the studies, so that the child will not be distracted. But what it turned out to be today is something that the purpose is defeated. So that's why I said that let me appreciate my colleagues, because the level of support that they gave to the motion, that they shows that we have the lawmakers in the country that have the interest of the young ones, the next generation at heart.
There are many conversations in that regard, because some people say oftentimes what has happened is that in many instances the schools that have been vulnerable, especially to external attacks, have been government schools that are for the poor. Let me put it that way, for lack of a better phrase, but that this is now affecting the elites. where we have now finally been able to cocoon our children, and somehow, even within the school, it was seen that they're still very much affected, and perhaps maybe that's why this is getting all the attention that it deserves. I don't know if you want to, weigh in on it from that perspective. Have we failed our children, Nigeria's children in general, and somehow because the schools that the children of the elite are now going to, somehow this is now a national emergency?
Well, education is it is a national emergency now, because in the first instance, why do we have private schools? What came about the establishment of private schools? The fact that our government schools are not doing what they're meant to do. If I would ask our honorable, can he send his child to a government school? Of course, the answer will be no. Even me as a person, I can't send my child to a government school.
But let me come up with this issue of bullying, which has now come up on the surface as, what has happened. The culture of silence is particularly worrisome. When you listen to the story which Sylvester's father narrated in great detail to Punch newspapers, what strikes you there was how long it took for the young boy to be able to come out to say, this is what happened to me. For a long time, he maintained the story that he fell while playing football. But even though they could see that the injuries did not tally with that. In the case of Karen, who you also raised in the House of Representatives, till tomorrow, we don't know precisely what she told her mother, if she ever mentioned how she finally ended up with a condom inside of her. So it was seen that there is a culture of silence which has enabled the bullies to continue to get away, and in some instances also, put the schools, I don't know, would I say puts them in a situation whereby, are they the ones who are also enabling this? Because if you also look at the statements they put out, there are big question marks as to, how they could be putting out this sort of statement in the light of what had transpired. How do you suggest we begin to break that culture of silence? I'll come to her first and I'll come to you.
Okay. So when we're having the discussion earlier, I said something that when it comes to bullying, it's not just saying that our school, there's no bully policy in the school. The reason why there's silence is because the children don't even understand the effects of bullying on the children, on the person that is being bullied, on you that you're standing by and watching another child being bullied, and on the person that is bullying. There's always a psychological
Is that all that there is a code? I mean, Honorable, you went to school, you're a father, I imagine that you are. I'm sure you have children whom you also want to be strong, to be able to stand up for themselves in society. And I am also a mom, but I had siblings who went through boarding house. And I know that in the very first year, it's usually quite tough. But your parents will tell you, don't worry, brace up. It's usually like that. And by the second year, you'll get stronger. And, there's always an urge for parents to want their children to be toughened up, so to speak. As a parent and also a member of the House of Representatives and also one who moved this motion, how do you think we can begin to tackle this culture of silence?
Thank you very much. I think I would like to start from the foundation. Let's take it from that angle. Because when you look at some of the schools that we have today, originally they were not meant to be schools, let alone the boarding facilities that they have in those schools. So I think with the current situation that we are facing, part of the recommendation that we made as House of Representatives, we have decided we are still going to come up, bring this matter in form of a bill that schools are not going to be established anyhow, the way they like. We want a situation where if somebody wants to establish a school, the person will have to go through certain, processes. There must be certain criteria that you have to meet before the Ministry of Education can approve for such, school to be established.
By saying that they're not supposed to be schools in the first instance, you're referring to their structures, I imagine.
No, let me come. Apart from the structure, I'm looking at the requirement, what you need to have in your school. Just like my colleague here, she's a psychologist. So in those days, when I was in school, when I was in secondary school, we used to have what we call counselors. I'm not sure so many schools today bother to have such, resource persons in school environment So apart from the physical structure, we are looking at a situation where schools should have, resource persons like psychologists. They should have a counselor before we talk of other facilities that will help the children, to have a conducive learning environment. You have to be aware that these children are not from the same family. These children are from different families, and most of them have different cultures. They're not even from the same states. So bringing different children with different backgrounds to live in the same room, eat together, and then learn together. I mean, it's something that we need to be worried about, the issue of integration, how they can be integrated.
How do we begin to understand that these external factors are also there, even while we're creating the rules and things of the sort that you're expecting that the Federal Ministry of Education might be able to come up with?
Okay, apart from the issue of the counselors that I mentioned here, and also psychologists, what about hostel management? There must be a manager that manages the hostels. So that's part of the recommendation that we have made. I'm quite sure, when you look at the two cases, the recent cases that we have, if they were to be hostel managers, I'm sure that thing wouldn't have happened. They would have been provision where somebody would sit down to monitor what the children are doing. If business premises that people just walk in and get what they want and then walk out, they could be that sensitive to say, okay, with this kind of environment, with the goods that they have, let them make provision for, security, safety, where somebody will just sit down, either monitor it physically or they use electronic means to monitor. Somebody will just sit down and then monitor the activities of the premises. So if business premises could be that valued, what about children? What about our children? So I think we should start from the angle of making sure that the environment is conducive. Apart from the physical, structure, there must be resource persons in various, angles that should
Is this something you
monitor.
think is also applicable to government schools?
It should
These
be
measures which you're
be
proposing?
both private and government schools, because we all send our children to. I know my colleague said here that I might not want to send my child to government school. I'm not sure that's correct. There are some government school that, when you look at the environment, it's still conducive for learning.
How do parents begin to find out if they have created a situation which has led to their children becoming bullies?
So everyone, we're all from homes. That's one thing we need to know. That's the fact we need to establish. We're all raised in a home. How are you raising your child? Are you available for that child? The child in the home, how does the child behave? Is the child aggressive with his younger ones? Is the child Does the child lack empathy? Does the child come home with things that you've not bought for him and you've never queried the child? Where did you get these things from? So, raising a bully, no one would say, I want to raise a bully. No one no one would wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to raise a bully. But our inactions actually causes our children to become bullies. Are you there for the children? Are you available for them emotionally? Can they speak with you? How do you correct them? Do you correct them by hitting them, shouting at them? The people in your home, how do you correct them? Do you hit them? Do you shout at them? These are the things your children are seeing. And one of the things we say in parenting is that children learn by observation. So all those little things you do that you think they're not important, they're the things your children are seeing. So as a parent, you have to be very vigilant with the child. How your son, how does he relate with your other children? Your daughter, how does she relate with her siblings? How do they relate with people outside the home? Maybe the security man. No, the mannerism, how do they talk? What words come out from their mouth? Who are their friends? There are quite a lot of things parents actually need to do to see or to know if they've raised a bully or if they're raising a bully. No bully was raised in isolation. The bully came out from a home. The bully came out from a family. Mothers, fathers, are you bullies yourselves? These are things parents should actually start looking at. We need to start checking ourselves. I was having a conversation with someone recently, and the person was like, the way she was raised is enough for her to raise her children to become bullies. Because her parents hate her, her parents did all sorts of mannerism to her. But she's now conscious of the fact that she does not want her children to be raised in that same way. So she's very deliberate about it. She's gone for parenting classes, parenting education, so that she would raise her children in a better way.
Let me come to you, Honorable. You have asked in your motion the Inspector General of Police to look into the matter and continue the investigation. Why do you think the Inspector General of Police should be involved?
Thank you very much. When we talk about the issue of bullying in our schools, it's not just about the two that we identified recently. We have a whole lot of them. But it's just that maybe those ones have not been escalated. So our motion stipulated that we should even look into other schools that we have not had yet those issues. So we are looking at a situation where the Inspector General of Police should take over this, the two cases and then possible launch a thorough investigation in other schools to really know what is going on. When we said Inspector General of Police, he has a team. He doesn't work alone. He has a team. And I think from my experience, in the recent time, he has been doing very well. There was a particular case that I raised in Akwa Ibom. I'm sure you were aware of that case in Oromoni. We also called on him to take over the file. I can tell you that the outcome, the results achieved so far is quite encouraging. So I think this particular two and other ones that are yet to be discovered will also go in the same direction.
Shouldn't we have a more holistic way of addressing it rather than having, say, the Office of the Inspector General of Police look into, this one or two of these matters?
Thank you very much for that particular issue that you just raised. I think 4 months ago, I raised a motion on the floor calling on the Chief Judge of the Federation to set up a special court to try this kind of cases, case of assault and rape. I'm yet to get feedback from the CJ. So what motivated that motion was the issue you just raised, that when you go to the regular courts or you go through the police, because of the numbers of cases they have to discharge on a daily basis, there might be some level of delay. So that was the reason I actually raised that motion, which was unanimously passed by the House, asking the CJ to set up special courts to try these assault cases and rape. So I'm quite sure by the time that particular court is set up, it's going to help to address most of this issue.
Like in the US, where a student, a 15-year-old, killed 4 of his own classmates in the US, that matter, he's going to be tried as an adult. Do you think that in this particular matter, such a rule should apply, or do you think it will be too heavy if you were to look at, say, the impact also on the bullies, who some people will argue also needed help?
Anyone that is found bullying another person, there should be consequences for the action.
In schools? Or?
In schools, like in France now, they have a law, 3 years, minimum of 3 years for anybody that's found bullying. We should have something similar to that in Nigeria. It might not be 3 years, might not be whatever it is, whatever number of years, but it should be made a law. However, before they face consequence of the action, they should also go through psychological evaluation. Once they know that there is a consequence for the action, I think it would reduce this. I see it as a crime. Bullying is a crime. So there should be consequences for this action.
Do you think it should be tried as adults or juveniles?
I wouldn't say, no, they should be tried as juvenile, but depending on the age now. So for those that are like 15 upwards, they are aware of their action. They know that what they're doing is bullying.
Are you looking into any, any measures or any complaints or any measures that can be taken to ensure that schools are accountable? What we're after is that the students who are in their custody and in their care are safe while they're within their walls.
Thank you very much. If you look at the motion, the caption of the motion, it actually captured everything, not just the victims. Sorry, not just the culprits, even the school management are part of it, because from the stories that we heard today, it is quite clear that the school, they were aware of what happened. But when they look at their image and maybe the consequence they are going to face, so they decided to shield the entire situation until the father was able to get the true facts. And it was already late as at that time.
Do you think that people who are culpable in this, should they be tried as juveniles or should they be tried as adults?
They should be tried as adults. Just like what my colleague said here, it depends on the age. If the age is low, like something 15 and below, they can still be tried, but they should give them minimal level of punishment. But anyone from 15 and above should be tried as adult. That's the only way we can minimize the level of bullying in our schools and even other places.
Do you think it's going to further reinforce the code of silence?
When we talk about the code of silence, it's, you know, because the victim knows that if the culprit gets to know about it, I'll be further punished. Even if the culprit is sent away, his friends might beat me or might punish me. The child will not talk. But in a case where the school will protect, and that's where the child safety and protection policy should come in schools. Every school should have a child safety and protection policy, whereby if a child comes to report bullying or comes to report anything, the child's identity should be protected. So even when the culprit is being called to face a panel of inquiry and all that, the victim's identity is protected. When the victim's identity is protected, the code of silence will be broken.
For those who have been triggered as a result of this, who now have, you know, very painful recollections as a result of Sylvester's passing, what would you say to them?
They should go for therapy. Because, you know, we have this thing called post-traumatic stress disorder, and most times it's being triggered by flashback of what has happened to them in the past. What happened to Sylvester could actually bring back the memories of what has happened to them in the back. So they need to go for therapy. They need to see a psychologist, need to go to the hospital, see a therapist. Therapists will help you out.
Are you optimistic that there will be justice at the end of the day for these two young people whose name you mentioned on the floor of the House, for Sylvester and Karen Hapuch?
Just like I said earlier, that the previous cases that we referred to the IG have been properly handled. I can say that. Example is the one of a newborn memorial in Akwa Ibom State. So I've been following up the matter as the one that raised the motion. So I'm satisfied with the outcome so far. And I believe that justice is going to be obtained at the end of the day. So I believe that that same way the IG has been handling this kind of cases, I'm quite sure in a very short time, the family of these two children will get justice. But I would still want you to talk about this issue of guidelines for our boarding facilities. It's very important. We cannot really neglect that part. If not, we will continue to, you know, experience this on a daily basis, because our children are growing up. They are growing up. So even when the young ones are becoming adults and then go to the university, the young ones are coming in. So if this foundation is not handled properly, if the structure is not there, there will still be a problem. So let's look at these guidelines that we stipulated in the motion. Like I said earlier, it's not proper for anybody to use any building or any facility and then turn it to a school without necessary measures being put in place. Because I keep saying that if those things were there, I'm not sure this thing would have happened. I'm not sure Nigerian school system, especially this boarding facility, have enough security to really guarantee the safety of our children. So we need to look at that foundation. It's very important.
Well, I have to thank you both for sharing your time and your thoughts with us this morning. Honorable Uyime Idem is a member of the House of Representatives, and he's the one who moved the motion on Sylvester, Oromoni, and Karen Hapuch Apaga, who attended different private schools and died under very controversial circumstances. Thank you for coming on Hard Copy. And Oluwatoyin Ogunkomi, thank you so much for coming on Hard Copy as well.
Thank you.
Well, that's our program tonight, but as always, do feel free to share your thoughts with us. What do you intend to do differently with your children this holiday season? Please use the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Good night.